Hi, welcome to this week's episode of the Pulse Regen Strategics Policy and Political Podcast. I'm delighted to be joined once again alongside Libby Lyons, fresh off the plane from the Northern Hemisphere in much warmer climes. Welcome back.
Thanks, Pat. Great to be back. It was pretty cold and miserable there.
Yeah, well, you won't be saying that for the next couple of months,
No.
I'm sure. Libby and I are delighted to be joined today by Grace Molloy, CEO and co-founder of Menopause Friendly Australia. Grace, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about the evolution of Menopause Friendly Australia.
Well, it's an organisation that I founded, Pat, out of sheer frustration.
Yep.
A few years ago, I went through my own peri-menopause journey, trying to find information about what I was going through, and I just had no idea what was happening to my body and how to stay well as I transitioned out of having children into midlife. So I looked around to see, well, who is providing information to women and where are we supposed to learn about menopause? We don't learn about it at school. I didn't learn about it in my nursing degree, which is pretty shocking since it's something that every person born with ovaries will go through. And I also didn't learn about it at home, which for me was also interesting, having an obstetrician father and a midwife mum who talked about too many things about women's health around the kitchen table. I was a little bit scared to have my own children, to be honest, with all the stories I'd heard, but I'd heard nothing about perimenopause or menopause. So I thought, well, someone's got to do something about this. It might as well be me. And I looked across the globe to see, well, who is talking about it, particularly in the workplace, where for me it was really difficult to navigate some of the symptoms that I was going through at work as well. So I really wanted to bring information to women where we are, and so many of us will be working as we go through this life phase. So Menopause Friendly Australia was born 3 years ago, and we're really, really grateful that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're taking a lot of the information and support that's really worked in other regions, particularly in the UK, and really able to embed that quite quickly here in Australia. And we'll talk about, I'm sure, some of the acceleration of the conversation that's happened in the workplace because of a few people like me standing up and saying we deserve better and women need to get this information.
Yeah, the importance of advocates.
Yeah.
Why is the UK, as a jurisdiction you just mentioned, why are they perhaps a little bit ahead of where Australia is presently?
Well, the business partner of mine now, Deborah Garlick, she actually was one of the founding sort of movement owners in the UK, and she also, like me, kind of fell into this area by accident, out of her own frustration too. And she started writing the first menopause policies in the UK around 2016, 2017. And again, like similar to here, there was a Senate inquiry or a parliamentary inquiry in the UK that really drove and accelerated some of the conversation. But also Davina McCall, I'm not sure if you know who she is. She's, for anyone who doesn't know who she is, she's sort of like Sonia Kruger in the Australian sense of a presenter on TV. She's well known. She's seen as being very vivacious and very outgoing. And she did a 2-part documentary series about menopause and perimenopause. And that really accelerated the conversation in the UK. And then workplaces were really wanting to make sure that, again, some of the productivity challenges in menopause were addressed and wanting to make sure that people could talk about menopause and feel as if it was a conversation that was welcome in the workplace. So from about 2016, when those first policies were written, now we see in the UK there's actually a new rights bill, employment rights bill going through their parliaments at the moment that will mandate menopause plans for employers. So it's been a bit of a journey to get there. There's still about 25% of workplaces now have a policy on menopause in the UK, and about 50% are taking action. But still we do see in the research many people still saying, even after all of that time, I still don't feel quite confident and comfortable talking about menopause at work. So it's not really a simple solution. We're really talking about changing cultures and breaking down stigma and taboo, and that doesn't really happen overnight. So the good thing is we can learn from them and bring that here.
So why does Menopause Friendly UK and Australia focus on workplaces?
Well, we think it's a fantastic intervention point for people because, like me, so many women don't even know that menopause starts a lot earlier than you think. So for me, for example, I wasn't going to go looking for perimenopause or menopause information for what I was going through. So it's a great place to actually provide that information to people, because 81% of us are going to be working through our menopause transition. So we can get to so many people in the workplace. And the benefits of being a menopause-friendly employer extend not only from the individual, but people around them that are also potentially going to be impacted by menopause in their relationships at home with their family members, but also for the workplace has, there's business reasons, there's productivity reasons why it's really important that people can ask for help or support if they need it. Because right now women are actually just deciding to leave early, scaling back their career. And some of the stats shows that 1 in 4 women will actually consider leaving work because of their symptoms. So this costs organisations, that turnover.
So what age range are we talking about?
So it's really interesting because when you see an image of a menopausal woman on TV, or if you've seen in a movie someone who's going through menopause, it's a very old-looking woman who's having a hot flush, and that's kind of it. So actually, people like me are menopausal women. Really in your 20s you can start going through menopause, but the average age is 45 to 55 for actual menopause, which is a one-day event when you haven't had a period for 12 months. Again, something that most people don't even know. Menopause is a one-day event. But perimenopause, which is really what we're talking about when we say we're having symptoms, that's the time leading up to that one-day event, and that can last 10 years on average. So if you think about 45 being normal and average to go through it, then 35 is often when we start to experience symptoms. And if you think about now, we are having children later. People are putting off having children, and so many women say, I had my child and I rolled straight into menopause. So again, it's so important that we're giving people information so they can plan for their fertility as well as their menopause journey, and be prepared for what they're going to go through so that they don't have to have a rough time through it. And people say to me, is menopause like adolescence in reverse? And my answer to that is, it is, in that your hormones change and you stop having periods, but it's a much wonkier ride and it goes for a lot longer. Yet with adolescent kids, I don't know if you've got any in the house. I know we were talking a bit earlier, Pat, about our children, mine and my 12-year-old starting to become quite adolescent. We kind of cut them some slack, don't we? We say, oh, it's just the hormones. That's why they're being a bit short or grumpy or not sleeping or being moody.
Yeah.
But we don't really do the same with menopause. We don't actually cut people some slack and go, oh, it must be their hormones that's making them, feel that way and behave that way. And so I think it's important to talk about that and to normalise it, because if you're going through it yourself, you can feel really lost, and you can often feel as though you don't know who you are. And that's one of the really sad parts about people not having that information, is the isolation and the feeling of people feeling really a loss of self-esteem and self-confidence for something that it's actually really normal and could be their hormones that's making them feel that way.
How have workplaces in Australia, how are they reacting to Menopause Friendly Australia, and what are they doing?
They actually are now doing a lot. So there's a few reasons why it's now quite an urgent and important thing for organisations to be looking at. One was the Senate inquiry into menopause last year, and the recommendations for that were strong around the workplace. The recommendations said that workplaces should educate people on menopause, and particularly managers, of how to have good conversations. It also recommended that WGEA starts gathering data on menopause. It used to gather data on menopause, but it stopped. So that was a recommendation, was that WGEA does recommence gathering that data. So workplaces are going to need to report what they're doing around it, which is another reason that they should do it. Also, there's the legal case. So a lot more people are wanting to talk about menopause in the workplace. And in the UK, there's actually quite a few tribunal cases where people have been unfairly dismissed or, have been discriminated upon based on their menopausal status. So those are kind of the compelling reasons for organisations. But also there is that it's becoming a minimum standard in a workplace now. The unions are really heavily pushing for leave, for additional entitlements as well for menopause, menstruation and reproductive health. So in Victoria, in West Australia and in Queensland, there's now entitlements in quite a few public sector awards, and we'll see that continue. So industry as well are looking at what should we be doing and how can we support people. And so I think it's really great that there is that curiosity and that intent. And the beauty of Menopause Friendly Australia is when an organisation says, yes, I actually want to do this genuinely, we can help them to implement a program or an initiative in a way that's going to mean that it's a success. Because like anything where there's stigma or taboo, it needs some careful consideration and planning to address any underlying stigma or any hesitance within an organisation, so that when you are asking people to have conversations or you're giving them leave, that they feel comfortable and they know how to access that support, how to get the information, and for those giving the support, that they know how to help people and how to have a conversation, because it can feel a bit uncomfortable if you've maybe never even spoken the word menopause, to be able to do that. So providing that structure is really key.
Are there leading organisations in your mind? You can feel free to name drop a few, but what are they doing presently?
Well, interestingly, we actually, our very first member, because I'm a West Aussie, we're an Australian organisation, but I was really keen for our first member of Menopause Friendly to be from WA, and it was the Parliament of Western Australia. And so we actually held our launch in Parliament House, which was brilliant. We had some really great champions who were members of Parliament that said, yeah, let's actually get behind this. So, but what we actually do as an organisation is accredit workplaces based on our 5 standards. So we can say confidently that there's now 7 menopause-friendly workplaces that are accredited in Australia for what they've done. The first one was Deloitte. They'd done a lot of work actually for many years. They had a couple of really strong champions in this space. They want to be an employer of choice in this area, so they had done quite a lot of work before we even started supporting them. So they've been a fantastic advocate. St John Ambulance, St John WA, they've become accredited. People like Australian Red Cross Lifeblood are accredited. We've got Flinders University as the first university here to be accredited. I feel like I need to say them all. Otherwise, the ones that I've missed out are going to say, you missed us. There's only 7. So Bristol Myers Squibb, so they are a pharmaceutical organisation. They actually have now become the first accredited in the UK and in Australia, so that's really fantastic. We have Anglo Gold Ashanti, so gold mining company. Obviously, if you can think of the support that they're providing at Anglo Gold is going to be very different to the support that's being provided at Deloitte, as it should be. And that's the beauty of the standards and of the accreditation. It's not a tick box. It's not do X, Y, and Z and you'll get accredited. It's really each organisation needs to decide how and what they're going to do within the framework. And then when it comes time to be accredited, they need to show why they've done what they've done, rather than just saying, well, we've done this. They need to show why they've done it and then what the outcome's been in terms of impact. And Libby Lyons is one of our independent panellists who is accrediting organisations and sits on a panel very independently to us, because we're the cheerleaders working with organisations, really wanting to support them through to get accredited. So we have an independent panel who assess those applications and decide whether or not the organisation's done enough to achieve the accreditation. So it's been great working with Libby.
Impeccable integrity, so I'm sure that's a good appointment of Libby. And those 5 standards for the benefit of listeners.
Yeah, so the first one is culture, which is often the one that we assess last, because culture is the most difficult to evidence. How do you evidence what your workplace culture is like? So working culture is so important in this. There's training, so making sure you've provided role-specific training, so not just an information session on menopause, but some support for a manager to have a conversation so that they feel confident and comfortable in the conversation. You might have provided menopause champions, you might do e-learning, so having a training program that's been really well implemented. Communications and engagement, super key, because you can have training, you can have a policy, but if you're not telling anyone about it, if you're not engaging people in the conversation, if you're not having leaders really across it, then it's not going to be an impactful initiative. So training, communications and engagement culture. And then the other 2 are working environment. It's often the easiest one. Have we provided period products? Have we got fans? Is the air conditioning cold enough? And that's often one of the main, don't have an argument with someone in the workplace about air conditioning. It's very much so if you've got someone going through menopause, but it can be really impactful to have even a desk fan if they're having hot flushes, and uniforms, things like menopause-friendly uniforms. So that's in the working environment category as well. And then a policy or a guidance. And we know that some organisations, it might take a long time to get a policy. It might be something that writing a policy is really quite a intense project to have that signed off at many levels. So an organisation can have a toolkit or a guidance rather than a policy. But for us, it's about having a central place that writes down what support is available so that if someone's experiencing it and they want support, they know where to go. And if I'm a manager who wants to try and help or implement some reasonable adjustments or some changes in the workplace, I've got a policy that I can go to that is really clear and shows me what to do as a manager. So those are the 5 standards of accreditation, and they've been based on research and evidence from workplace development and organisational, development. So we really know that and are confident that if a workplace has, done what they needed to do to meet those standards, that we can accredit them as menopause friendly. So it's very exciting to see more and more companies and organisations really wanting to achieve that.
I just want to ask about HRT because, of course, for anyone who has been through menopause, peri-menopause, whatever, there was so much controversy. There has been so much controversy over the last couple of decades, actually, about HRT, and I think we're finding now that that the evidence that used to be put forward as an argument against HRT is actually doesn't really stand up. So tell us a little bit about the importance of, and you're talking to someone here who's been on HRT for a very long time and swear by it. So tell us a little bit about this, the importance of HRT and why some of these things have been debunked of late.
It's the biggest question we get asked in all of our sessions because there's so much confusion and misinformation about HRT. In Australia, we call it MHT just to make it even more confusing, which is menopause hormone therapy. HRT is hormone replacement therapy. So there was a move to make it menopause hormone therapy rather than saying that we're replacing hormones. So it is the gold standard treatment for menopause. In the early 2000s, 2001, there was a study called the Women's Health Initiative. It was a fantastic study because for the first time we realised, women aren't small men. Maybe we should study women independently of men. So that was actually a really fantastic thing, and it was the largest scale study of women's health that had ever occurred, and it was in the US. What happened with the estrogen and progesterone HRT side of it was that they actually took a cohort of women in their 60s, so the average age was 63. The average age of menopause is 51. They took women who didn't have symptoms of menopause, who had other underlying health conditions, and they really wanted to see, there was some evidence that HRT might be able to reduce cardiovascular disease risk. So the study in its design was flawed because the population wasn't actually the population of people who are usually taking HRT. They were at increased risk of several of those conditions, and it was very overstated in some of the findings that were drawn from that, and some of the chief investigators have actually come out and said, we're really sorry because it actually had a huge impact based on what was said. So there was a slight increase in breast cancer risk for one of the cohorts, and they were taking a progestin, which is a synthetic progesterone. They were also taking an oral estrogen, which we don't really use much anymore. So since then, a lot of these hormone therapies have developed and become safer as well. We did learn some things which were great. So particularly that oral estrogen can cause blood clots. So that was one of the findings. So we did learn some things which were helpful, but it really did set back menopause research and development because overnight we had this finding that estrogen equals cancer. And so 80% of women who were taking it stopped taking it. Doctors stopped prescribing it. I mean, doctors take an oath to do no harm. And then you tell them, actually, you've been prescribing this estrogen and progesterone that's you're going to cause all of this breast cancer risk. So we do what we have had to do, and we are still doing a lot of work to unwind some of that because, like I said, a lot of the findings weren't actually, evidence-based in terms of the population. We have more modern treatments that are safer. A lot of people take now a estrogen patch or a gel, so transdermally through the skin, which is a lot safer to reduce those blood clot risks. And for so many women, it is an absolute life changer. It helps them to stay in their jobs. It helps them to feel happy and well in their relationships. It helps with hot flushes and night sweats. It helps them to sleep. There are so many more studies now that are coming out showing actually some benefits around reducing cardiovascular disease risk. And we need a lot more of that research so that we can further debunk it. I think the other thing to note, women's health's great at pitting one against the other. You know, it's like when you have a child, are you going to have it naturally, or are you going to opt out and have a cesarean, or are you going to have any drugs, or are you going to do it naturally? And then when it's time to have breastfeeding, are you going to breastfeed, or are you going to bottle feed? And it's the same in menopause. Are you going to go on HRT, or are you going to do it naturally? And I think we've just got to stop this, judgment around women's choices. I think we do have some work to do to give an informed choice for women, so that when we're sitting opposite a doctor, we've got all the information, we have the data, and then we can make a decision based on our risks and the benefits, which is what really we want in informed choice with our medical professionals. But right now we have a really misinformed consumer or patient sitting opposite a quite uneducated doctor. And I'm not saying that off of a whim. The Senate inquiry showed that doctors have 1 hour of learning on menopause in their degrees. So unless they've gone and taught themselves or found out information on menopause, they are not well educated. So that conversation's not going to go well. And informed choice is really around having that solid conversation with someone and going, well, this is what you could do, this is what your risk is, here are the options, what would you like to do? So that patient-led care really needs to happen. The good news is there is some movement in this. So the government have announced $574 million towards women's health, which is fantastic. Some of that is going to create the first ever guidelines on the management of menopause for GPs, which when I heard that, I was a little shocked that we don't have them yet. So right now your GP, if you go to a GP for, say, diabetes, they've got a standard management plan of how, based on evidence, that should be supported. And that doesn't exist for menopause. So that will be great because that'll give doctors more confidence in how to support someone either through HRT or in other measures, because there's so many different ways you can manage menopause. But also it will give consumers that as well. So that's something for us to look at and know what we can expect in terms of supporting ourselves through menopause. And there's also a public awareness campaign on menopause that's being developed at the moment. And we've seen Medicare, new Medicare codes for menopause also, so people can go and actually ask for a menopause appointment from their doctor. So these things are starting to shift the dial, but this is going to take time. And in the meantime, we've got to help people to really advocate for themselves with the right evidence-based information. So that's what we do with Menopause Friendly. We provide information sheets that people and trackers, and we provide videos on how to have a great conversation with your doctor, so that when they go and sit opposite someone, they can say, I've done all my research, this is what's happening for me, and this is what I'd like to try. And that hopefully will mean that they have a better experience with their doctor.
Those resources available to everyone?
They're available to members. We do have some free resources on our website, and you can find them on menopausefriendly.au. But for our members, we provide resource packs every quarter. So that might align with, say, International Women's Day or World Menopause Day, Mental Health Week. We provide those resources to our members, and we have members from right across from local government through to ASX 10 organisations. So really accessible to any employer.
And what feedback are you receiving from members and those that have gone through that accreditation process? Are they starting to see impacts and benefits with regard to retention or feedback from their employee base?
Yeah, absolutely. The number one piece of feedback we get from people is, I can't believe how many people engaged with this initiative. We run all of these programs and we put in so much effort into providing things in the workplace, and it's really great to see how people are really leaning into this because they're not getting this information outside the organisation. They're so grateful that we've been able to provide this for them. And in one case, this story just touched me really deeply. There was someone who attended one of our workplace training sessions, and our message is, if you're experiencing symptoms, you don't have to put up with them. There's things you can do. Don't feel like you just have to struggle along. Here's some information that you can use to go and talk to your doctor. And this person had been putting up with severe symptoms for a really long time and had not wanted to go to their doctor to talk about it because they thought that they would just get prescribed HRT and they maybe didn't want that, and they thought, I'll just try and manage it. That person did then, after our session, she said, actually, I'm going to go see my doctor, and found out that she had stage 4 ovarian cancer. And so she'd been putting off going to the doctor. So it really is changing lives, this information. And for employers, that employee engagement that comes from having an employer who actually cares about what's going on for me, and particularly for women in midlife who can often feel like no one's looking after us. We kind of feel like the forgotten, invisible people in workplaces and in families too. And generally, I think that can really provide a great opportunity for workplaces to see that employee engagement. We've had other stories where people have said, I was putting off going to have a hysterectomy because I didn't want to take leave. And some organisations that have brought in leave, that's been the impetus for someone to go and have a hysterectomy, and then they're feeling so much more well at work. They're not taking a lot of time off. So we're seeing some of that in workplaces too, with absenteeism declining. When we did some research last year with Dove, we did a survey of 1,000 working women in Australia, and 55% of them said that they felt they weren't performing their best at work because of menopause symptoms. 46% said that they felt they'd lost confidence, and 44% said that they had lower self-esteem. And one of the scary statistics, 26% of people said that they wanted to take time off, but they didn't have any leave or they couldn't financially afford to. And what we see is that those people, there's that presenteeism where they're showing up to work, they're not feeling well. So having this support and awareness really means that people are encouraged to go and actually get help for their symptoms, feel better, and then come to work more productive, feeling really grateful that they're in a working environment where people actually consider what their needs are. So there's been some really fantastic stories already from some of those accredited workplaces.
Grace, you've also set up an organisation called Menopause Australia. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you've set that up?
Yes, a bit confusing, Menopause Friendly Australia and Menopause Australia. So Menopause Australia is a DGR1 charity, so it's a tax-deductible gift recipient. And I set that up because whilst I'm doing a lot of work in the workplace and helping to give information to women who are at work, there's a huge number of people who we're not able to access who might not be working, but also there's quite a lot of populations of people within the menopause category that really need some extra help and support. So people living with a disability, LGBTQI plus people, people from low socioeconomic areas, people from different cultural backgrounds, Aboriginal people who we haven't studied around menopause and who also need the support and information that's appropriate to them. So Menopause Australia is also an education and advocacy group. We really want to be a voice of the people who are experiencing menopause. We've seen some great starts in terms of investment with the Senate inquiry and the funding that's been provided. But Menopause Australia is a vehicle to make sure that there is a voice of menopausal people in Australia, advising government, but also directing funding. So what research needs to be done, what are the gaps, and making sure that those gaps are filled.
So it's a little bit about that coordination of research too, which is a little haphazard, I'd suggest, at the moment.
It's like every area of research. It frustrated me when I was in clinical research that we might have a clinical trial for one type of cancer that was really specific, but there might be someone, in another state who needed that, but they just didn't know about that research. So, yes, I think research coordination is becoming more and more important, and it is great to see that some of the universities are collaborating on these sorts of things. So I think specifically because menopause will impact every single person born with ovaries, that 3 in 4 of us will have symptoms that impact our daily lives, that the research coordination is really important because once you scratch the surface, there's so many different things. There's osteoporosis, there's cardiovascular disease, there's diabetes, there's dementia, there's all of these different groups that I mentioned. So it can feel overwhelming because menopause is quite a umbrella term for lots of these different things that are going on. So we hope to see some coordination of the research that's being done and to really prioritise and increase the funding towards that because there's very little funding for women's health and tiny amounts of funding at the moment for menopause.
Grace, what are the more compelling reasons for organisations approaching you and seeking to become accredited?
Well, one of the reasons organisations are realising now is that we have a compliance-driven workforce as well. So we need to make sure we're complying with laws and legislation and being a standard, being an employer of choice. So an ISO standard is actually being developed for menopause and menstrual health, and it's in the workplace health safety area. And that has actually had some people talking. So why is menopause what's it got to do with workplace health safety? And I think that's great because it gives us the opportunity to talk about not just the physical aspects of menopause, but also the mental health aspects of menopause. And I think workplace health safety officers can be a really key person in an organisation to drive something forward. So I'm actually on the Standards Australia committee that's reviewing the draft international standard on menopause menstrual health in the workplace. It's likely to come in early next year, so quite soon, and we're encouraging employers to get ahead of that. Don't do it just because you have to. Stand up and be one of the first few and be an employer of choice and show your people that you are really leading by example and doing the right thing for your staff members.
Always good to get ahead of the game.
Always.
Well, Grace, it's been fantastic to catch you momentarily. I'm sure there's so much more that we could talk about, and we look forward to seeing how you progress and no doubt grow that membership base across a range of different sectors and industries throughout Australia. We speak to a lot of people on this podcast that are making a big impact in workplaces or in the policy landscape in Australia, but you truly are. So well done. That's fantastic, and really pleased to be able to have you on. We'll include some of those resources and links in the show notes for our listeners as well.
No, thank you. It's been my pleasure. It's really great to spread the word. So I appreciate you actually doing that within your podcast. Thanks.
Wonderful.
But I think too, this is for all organisations out there, you've got to start taking these things seriously, because the waste in talent and the waste in resources that you are putting into your people, and for them to leave purely because women cannot work because they're suffering from symptoms of menopause, is an absolute nonsense. So my advice is get off your butts now and do something, because it really needs to be done, because it will be actually good for your business.
Yeah. Very good. From the accreditor herself.
Yes, 100%.
Yes. Well, independent, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thanks, Grace.
Thank you.